Pastora. All right, let's see. Good to see you, Pastor. I hope you're doing all right. Okay, perfect. All right, so in case you're watching this later and it's recording and this is not live, we have a Discord server. There's a link in the pin chat on the live chat. There's also a link in the description of the video. It's essentially a church at this point. That's what I think of it as. It's a group of like-minded people who are all interested in a lot of the same things, a lot of weird things. Everybody's just trying to learn something. And it's a great place to be. So if you're interested in that, obviously it's free. It'll always be free. Check it out. If you don't like it, then just leave. Easy enough. Today, where are we at? We are continuing 1 Corinthians. We are in chapter 2. If you missed chapter 1, it was over an hour for that chapter. You can find it in on my YouTube channel. But I would recommend for Corinthians specifically, and I mean honestly for all of the epistles, I would recommend you backtrack if you miss something, because it really does all feed in. Because you got to think it's a letter to a church. If you come in halfway through the letter, you've missed context. That's relatively significant. It applies to all of the Bible, but the Gospels, for instance, they're easier to just kind of drop in on and not have it severely affect what you're learning, because they're not really linear. They just don't read that way. They weren't written that way. It's relatively different in that sense. The epistles are straight linear. It's a letter to somebody. It's a letter to somebodies. So I would recommend just backtrack through it. But we're picking up in 2. I'm going to jump right in because I feel like we're going to have very few people because of the Super Bowl. And, that's fine. That's fine. So we'll be quick. We'll be in and out. This is 2. You guys got to let me know if the music's too loud. I had to change everything, so I'm not quite sure if it's overbearing. I'll try to keep an eye on it, though, if you guys let me know that it is too loud. One sec. Sorry, guys. Everything is new. Lilith, good to see you. So 2, proclaiming Christ crucified. The crucifixion of Christ is a central theme to the Corinthian people from Paul throughout both epistles, 1 and 2. The reason for this, we're going to get into pretty deep as we go in, but the brief overview is that this demographic, this culture, had a very hard time with the concept of somebody dying and coming back to life. It's an issue that obviously all people to some degree have a hard time with, because it defies logic and rationale. But this demographic specifically in Corinth had a very specific hard time with it. Due to their immediate culture, it was frowned upon. So they have a bit of a harder push towards the crucifixion being problematic for them. And you can tell contextually that they complained about this, that they asked a lot of questions about this, that they had trouble with it. All of the epistles, they don't all have that. So it's a specific bit of context for Corinthian church, for the Corinthian church, that you just need to be aware of. Ruth, Ghost. So 2. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom. When I came to you is just a reference to his missionary journey prior. And Acts gives us that context. It's in Acts 18 where we learn a bit about that. Then he says, testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom. The Greek phrase that was used, it refers to the news about God's redemptive work specifically through the crucifixion of Christ, which is why this is titled the way it is. Paul had recognized the Corinthians' interest in the rhetorical speech and the philosophical wisdom and the what is now essentially what our current contemporary view of it would be is basically prosperity preaching. It happened different. It came across different. But you have to remember that rhetorical speech and specifically like wisdom through philosophy, these things were currency in Corinth because of the culture. If you were somebody like the celebrity pastors today who have the hook one-liners, and you see the shorts on Instagram where they're dropping the mic because it's such a clean, good sentence that they said. It's so captivating. People lose their minds over it. Is there any actual anything behind that? Not really. Like the dude figured out a very clever way to say something that captivated people. It's nothing actually special. It's the use of human language to captivate an audience. It's what con men do. It's no different. Obviously, the intention makes it very different, but the actual angelic speech of captivating somebody and coming across very wise and smart, there's no actual value in that. It's a communicative thing. It doesn't actually have inherent value. So in Corinth, we talked about it last week. It'll never stop talking about it until we finish. Is that this is if not the most important thing, it's very close context wise to fully grasp. Is that the philosophy of the time had started to encroach on the theology of the time. The difference was the theologians were not as good with their tongue. They weren't as good promoting the language. They weren't as good captivating an audience. The philosophers were very good at it. So the philosophers come in and they put Paul to shame, basically, as far as captivating an audience goes. They put Apollos to shame, basically, as far as captivating an audience goes. So he's recognizing here that the Corinthians' interest in that rhetorical speech, in that philosophical wisdom, that it was damaging them. But those skills to present an alternative message makes them a false teacher. And that's what he's dealing with, is people coming in, these philosophers coming in, essentially pretending to be theologians, pushing a similar gospel message, but not the same gospel message. And so they've captivated Corinth, and now Paul is doing damage control of trying to let them know, like, this is not the truth. This is not the gospel. You guys have degraded it. You've watered it down. This is an entirely different thing. 2, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. Not know anything among you. Your translation might be a little bit different, but it's basically the same. I'm looking at 3 here. It's basically the same. Due to the influence, more than anything else, of the Greek culture. And that's where we'll get into the crucifixion thing as well. The Corinthians valued the philosophy, they valued the knowledge, they valued the rhetoric. Those were their things. That was class for them. That was catchy for them. It's the difference between listening to one of the celebrity pastors today who's very captivating and listening to me. It's night and day. And as long as we're both promoting the same message, then there's no issue. But if the celebrity pastor who's on stage running around, jumping, spitting, but captivating, if he's preaching a different gospel message, then I would be Paul in this scenario, and that person would be one of these philosophers. Adversely, though, again, if these celebrity pastors today are preaching the actual gospel, and they're not watering it down in order to come across as wise, then compared to me, who would be Paul in this scenario, you'd probably be better off listening to the celebrity pastor, because they're also captivating, but they're also pushing a true gospel. The problem is that's not what was happening. The problem was Paul was bland, he was boring, he was academic, but he promoted the true gospel, and these very flashy philosophers were promoting a different gospel. So right here, he's using hyperbole to explain why he made Christ's actions on behalf of humanity the primary focus of his teaching with Corinth, instead of delivering these long speeches with the style and rhetoric of knowledge and wisdom. Why he wasn't focused on coming across as intelligent. He wasn't focused on coming across as wise. He was focused on conveying the gospel message and nothing else. He then said, he said after this, except Jesus Christ and him crucified. To Paul and for Paul, Jesus' death is central to the entire thing. It's central to his missionary work. It's central to the gospel message. Christ crucified, if you were to look it up and do a word study from Paul specifically, how often he brought up the crucifixion, it's actually probably more than you think. And you probably already think it's a good amount. But it was constantly. It's the crux of everything Paul does. That Jesus bore the sin of humanity through that death, through the sacrifice, through the crucifixion. But because the Corinthians, they seem to have considered the crucifixion to be something that is foolish. Why? Because of culture. So Paul is battling that throughout this entire thing. Paul is battling that. The Corinthian people saw the crucifixion as a type of foolishness due to the culture that they are in. So Paul is emphasizing the humility of Jesus' death on the cross, that it's a humility thing. It's not a foolish thing. It was in humility. This sets up Paul to describe the humble nature of his own ministry, which becomes another thing. Because as usual for Paul, he's constantly having to defend himself. Because these churches he plants, they essentially betray him at some point. It seems like most of the time. He said, "And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling." With much trembling, and he's speaking of his own fear. He's drawing a contrast there between himself and those speakers, those professional public speakers, the celebrity Christians of the time, not Christians, the celebrity preachers of the time, the celebrity philosophers is what they actually were. And he's using this, he's using it to draw the contrast, because he himself, again, was bland. And these speakers, the preachers, the philosophers, always had a very eloquent way of expressing everything. They always had a very seemingly wise way of keeping the audience engaged. Paul did not have that. He didn't. So he's fighting the battle. The apostle was a skillful speaker, for sure, but his delivery in all accounts seems like it was at the very least unimpressive. And that's his issue. That's hurting him in this scenario, because his adversaries are the opposite. They're obviously very captivating. They're very impressive, and they have no problem getting people to be hooked on a new gospel because it's close enough, and because they're so eloquent and they're so good at pushing the message. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. So the Greek word used for demonstration, it's trying to push it's expressing certainty of the Spirit's work through the Christians who are in the specific church. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Yeah, it's simply just conveying the certainty, this absolute way that the Spirit is working through the Christians there at Corinth. They value the wisdom and the logic. They cannot deny their experience, is what he's getting at. They cannot deny the experiences that they've had, the experiences that they're having, that are all a result of the Spirit of God. The philosophy can be explained. The work of the Spirit in the individuals, he's trying to tell them that cannot be explained. That is something else. And he's trying to use that as some kind of identification to get them back on board. It demonstrates their conversion from culture, which they're slipping back to, into being under Christ. All right, let me see real quick. Snake oil factory. Sometimes it can be hard to know what snake oil is regarding spiritual and metaphysical matters. Not impossible, just hard. I agree, actually. I've definitely been duped by a lot of pastors over the years. I think at this point I'm so cynical that now I'm on the other side, though. Where now sometimes I see it in people that I think if I took an honest inventory, they're probably not. They're probably doing just fine. It's something that I've identified in myself and that I'm very cognizant of. I'm too cynical about pastors who are very eloquent and very catchy and very one-linery, because I immediately judge them, and then I have to pull that back because that's a personal problem, and it's not fair. These guys are the Christian equivalent of the Greek. Yeah, and no wonder. That was a major influence for them. The sophists who held no value other than their own winning and their own benefit, same as today's celebrity pastors, apostles, and evangelists. Yeah, the Greeks are a huge part of the problem for Corinth, specifically. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. I used to draw. Oh, Dylan said, I used to be drawn to really charismatic pastors, but I've found that they're normally hiding something. And that's the problem, man, is that in my career as a pastor, the guys who were the best on stage, the best, anecdotal, this is all anecdotal, they were always the worst people. They were the worst people. The minute you get in them in a private meeting or in a financial meeting or in a small group, whatever, or just talking to them in the coffee shop, they were just assholes. All of them. All of them. I think there was one pastor I knew who was really good on stage. And he was also just a really, really good guy. Like he was absolutely genuine as far as I could tell. The rest of them, specifically when I worked in the megachurch, they were all assholes. They were terrible people. There was a bunch of scandals, whether they were public or not at the time. It was terrible, which feeds into the stereotype, which is why I am so cynical, and which is why that's a personal problem for me that I'm actively... every time I hear a really eloquent pastor, I have to stop myself and be like, no, give it a chance. Listen, hear him out, and then, decide based off that. Ghost said immune to BS due to inoculation over time. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, let me see. I think I wanted to go over one more thing here. Yeah, no, not really. So I mean, the faith might not rest in the wisdom of men. He's just explaining why he uses the approach he uses, and that it differs from the typical speakers. He wants to direct the Corinthian people back towards relying on God and not relying on human understanding and not relying on human abilities, which is what they've come to do. Which again it's a cultural thing. It's an absolute cultural thing. Wisdom from the Spirit. 6. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. So the mature. The Greek word that he uses there, it usually refers to those who understand and conform to the message of Jesus Christ. Specifically. There are other Greek words that convey what we might think immediately of the English word mature. In this context, and with the word he chose, it is to make them understand, and it's people who understand and conform to the message of Jesus Christ. So mature in faith would be the way that we say that in English today. He also might be applying the term ironically to the Corinthian believers, which I'm actually on board with that, because they considered themselves to be highly spiritual when in fact they were highly immature spiritually. And this was a church culture thing for them. Within the Corinthian church, they again, because of the outer culture, the demographic, where they lived, who they were around, what were the religious influences, because of all that, they pumped up the spiritual side. Like, nothing against charismatic Christians, but I view it very similar to charismatic Christians who are doing all sorts of wild stuff in the name of the Spirit. Far be it from me to say any of it is fake. I can't understand it at all. It's way off in another la la land for me. So this is a very similar thing where they regarded themselves as highly spiritual people. And Paul, in my opinion, and the opinion of many scholars, and you can look yourself and decide where you land with it, is that he's actually he's being an asshole. He's being ironic, because he's saying you are the furthest thing from spiritual. You guys are spiritually bankrupt. It's a joke that you think this of yourselves. He said, not a wisdom of this age. God's wisdom, the wisdom that comes from God, which is revealed through Christ's death, and he's going to keep going back to it. His death, his resurrection, and the saving of humanity. The saving of humanity is not bound by time. It's eternal. It's not a wisdom of this age. And he says, or of the rulers of this age. The Greek word that he used there, it can refer either to humans or to divine beings, which makes it a little bit muddy. The term may refer to Jewish and Roman officials who were involved in the crucifixion of Christ, it's one possible contextual point that would make sense. It also, however, could refer to evil spiritual entities, which also would kind of make sense. The same term was used in John 12, and then I believe in John 14 as well. My note cut off, but I think in John 14 too. So it's hard to say for sure, but either way, he's trying to emphasize that the leaders of either the human or the spiritual, what they have, it's temporal, whereas Christ is eternal. So not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age. This would be an interesting thing to see where you guys land with it. It's the end of 6, near the end of 6, when he's talking about the rulers of this age. If you're interested in doing some study on your own, see where you land. Whether he's speaking of human rulers, which would be either Jewish or Roman officials, or if he's talking about spiritual entities. It's hard to tell within context. It's impossible to tell because the same word was used. So it's tough, but it's interesting. It's something that it's not going to make a massive amount of difference for anybody in day-to-day life. But if you're a student of this ancient text, then it's something interesting to look into. I said, who are doomed to pass away. 7, but we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. 8, none of these rulers of this age understood this. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. So Lord of glory is obviously Jesus. The designation there, it echoes the Old Testament, which is a part of Paul's thing. It's a huge part of Paul's thing. And it comes from the Old Testament name for Yahweh, for God, the King of glory. That's in Psalm. And Acts also mentions God of glory. So you have these similar ways of saying essentially the same thing. And then what no eye has seen, it's from Isaiah. It's from Isaiah 64. But he's using Isaiah 64 to try to push the idea that people cannot understand the things of God through human faculties, which is a major part for why I say the things that I say about the way I word it is that you can't conceive what you can't conceive. You can't conceive something that you haven't experienced in some way. It's beyond it's beyond the ability of your human brain. Paul's basically saying this. He's using Isaiah 64 to say that people cannot understand the things of God through human faculties. Why do you think you'd be able to? How small-minded? How ignorant? You have to rely on the Spirit, and that's all. That's it. I don't see any other possible way, and even through that, I think that's real rough. Personally, I think it's really hard. Really, really hard thing to do. But to try to conceptualize God in a human brain, to me, it just sounds stupid as hell. I can't imagine anything dumber. It just seems illogical to me. And I know some of you guys disagree, but for me, I just can't do it. And maybe I'm limited. Hold on, I'm gonna look in the chat real quick. I went to a charismatic church. They literally handed out tissues every service, almost like they were encouraging the melodrama. Yes. And when we go into, there's a topic for Thursdays, for when everybody votes. One of the topics is the dark side of the megachurch. And a lot of that is going to be from my personal experience, but a lot of it will be pulled from other places too. And once you really get into the nitty gritty of how churches manipulate people, it's really, really sad. It's very dark. How did you survive the? It's fake with real implications. That's well said. Consequences. Yeah, I guess consequences would be what it is. Yes, I learn more on both as well. Oh, I lean more on both as well. Michael has such a great understanding of verse 8. I'll look it up. What do you mean understanding? In what context? Michael's fabulous though. All right, 10. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. God has revealed to us. He's shown the hidden wisdom to anybody who follows Christ. That's essentially it. He also, though, he argues that people who have a desire to know more or have some kind of greater, deeper wisdom should seek to walk closer to Christ, which is a given. But then you just don't see that much. But God will reveal things to people who stay in contact, essentially. And again, it seems like a given. But how many people on a daily basis are like trying to stay in constant contact with God? Actually, it's so easy to like come on here and talk about God and do our Discord thing and talk about God. But I wonder, cause for myself too, because it's a conscious thing for me. Otherwise, I totally go into just reality, away from the spiritual side of life. And I just get lost because it seems so far removed. But how many people, I think, in a general basis across the country who call themselves Christians, how many people do you think actually day in and day out intentionally try to, in some way, incorporate contact with God throughout every day? I would guess a very, very low amount. But maybe I'm just cynical. 11, for who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person, which is in him. So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. He's using the phrasing to again draw a contrast with the Spirit of God. As people know their own minds, so the Spirit knows the things of God. I hope that makes sense. Dylan said, I only went a couple of times, drawn to a charismatic pastor, disappointed with the speaking in tongues, numerous requests for donations, and all the other BS. Yeah. Okay. So Michael said how he describes the gambit between Satan and Christ in the wilderness. I'll find the video. Yeah, please do. I'd be interested to watch it. Interesting. Yeah, I'd really like to see that. 12. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. God's Spirit is not like the spirit of people or anything that could be comprehended, is what he's saying. It's an entirely different thing. It can't be, it's not something that humans can compute. It's not something that we can conceive. It's not something that we can reason with within this world, is what he's pushing in a general sense. God's work is completely eternal, which in and of itself kind of makes it outside of this world, because this world is not eternal. This world is limited. It's temporal. And that would include, obviously, all the people. That would include the Corinthians that he's talking to. That would include the leaders of Rome and the Jewish leaders as well. Spiritual beings. In some of Paul's writing, it seems like he puts a temporal status on some spiritual beings. I'd have to look to find any of the specific. It's not said directly, but in some contextual gatherings, it seems like maybe he thinks that about some spiritual entities or some spiritual beings. But regardless, in this context, it's specifically talking about God's Spirit, and that it's a very different thing. It functions very different, and it's outside of our ability to compute, comprehend, and conceive. Freely given is obviously just a reference to salvation, that it's something that we can achieve through Christ alone, because of the Spirit. It comes through the Spirit, but it's just a reference to salvation. 13, and we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. By human wisdom, obviously, without God's help, which comes in the form of the Spirit, humans in general lack the ability to understand God's plan. Which again, sounds like a duh, obviously. Why would it be any different than that? But again, I personally wonder how many people consciously think about that. If you are somebody who talks about like God's plan for my life and God's calling for me, and okay, cool, awesome. How often are you like actually trying to be in contact with the other side of this reality? How often? In what ways? Are you like saying an Our Father at bed and going to sleep and like, well, why don't I understand God's plan for me? That stuff loses me. I don't understand it. And maybe I'm just cynical. But that's with a lot of the people that I talk to. It seems like the old Catholic way of going about religion, where you recite things. I personally don't think that reciting things does anything at all. I don't think glory be to the Father brings you in any way closer to the other side of this reality. I think it's like something that humans need to intentionally dedicate massive amounts of time and energy to. I don't understand how there's any other way. And then it makes me wonder why people wonder why they're so lost and confused spiritually. And they end up leaving the faith because of this. Well, I can't ever hear God. I can't ever feel God. I don't know what God wants from me. Okay, what are you doing? Well, like I pray at night. Okay. Maybe that wasn't it. Maybe it's time to try something else. How much time are you putting into TikTok? Compare that to like how much time you're actually trying to be spiritually engaged. I would bet a lot of those people, specifically ones who leave the faith, the ratio is not right. It's probably very off. He said, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual, the Spirit is the one who can truly explain and who truly explains and reveals the ways of God to people, which is why I don't understand any other way than people being intelligently dedicated to like trying to be in touch with the other side. It's the only way. Scripturally, at least, it's the only way. There might be some woo-woo stuff that people talk about, but if you're a Bible-believing Christian, it is the only way. Believers are just messengers. They're instruments. They're vessels is the Christian word that people love. They're vessels of the Spirit's message, which is where I personally get my theological beliefs of, and everybody hates me for it. I don't believe God interacts with the world today. I don't. I do not. I think that God interacts with people through the spiritual connection, and then those people can do things that interact with the world today. That's hot take. But scripturally, even back then, I personally find a lot of corroboration of that theology. But all personal opinion, to make blatantly, blaringly clear. All right, 14. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him. He is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The natural person refers to any person who cannot grasp the things of God. That's something to understand, because I've heard people in the past misunderstand that terminology. Natural man just doesn't mean human. What he's talking about specifically is a person who does not understand God, somebody who's not spiritually in touch. So in many cases with Corinth, Paul would be talking about them. They were spiritually out of touch. These are people who don't grasp God. Many of them would have been considered natural men or natural persons, depending on your translation. Then he said, again, I'm going to read it again. He does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. Going back to everything I've already said, he's pushing, he's stressing, he's prodding. That what he's trying to get across is that a true understanding of the spiritual things, the Spirit itself, it can only happen in the aid of God's Spirit, which is where the disconnection happens. The people who are wondering why they feel spiritually disconnected when they're not connected to God, and the way Christians have decided to express this from the very beginning is the Holy Spirit, which is God's Spirit. If there's no connection to that, why the hell do you think you'd be spiritually connected to anything? You wouldn't. It's the tie that starts it all. It's the connection required for anything else to happen. It's like the power cord in a computer. You have all these components in a computer. All sorts of fancy stuff, a whole bunch of wires where power runs through. Cool. But if the power cord is not plugged in, none of that crap is going to work. It's all just junk. That's a Christian today. Many. They're computers without power cords. They're people who know the verses, they go to church, they do the worship thing, they tithe, they go to small groups, they were married at the church, their kids go to Sunday school, they're 100% plugged in, but they have no spiritual connection at all. It's all emotional. It's an emotional connection. They're emotionally connected to church, to their pastor, to the message, to the Bible. But there's no actual spiritual connection because they're spiritually bankrupt. And I don't blame them. I think the church has done that. The corporate church has done that. But it's the same. It's the same thing. With the spirit is the power cord. You can have everything else. If that doesn't exist, you have absolutely nothing. You have a hunk of junk. You're wasting your time, essentially. You're wasting your life. Why won't the video play? You're not on Wi-Fi, bro. What's the password? All right, let me go back. Just tag both. Okay, yeah, I'll watch that when we get off. Would verse 10 and 11 not institute that we can know God's intentions? Let me see. So Ghost is asking about this right here, 10 and 11. Jeez, where's 12 start there? So these things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person, which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Why would you say that? I'm curious for the explanation. Why would we know the thoughts of God through that? So he's saying that for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. But that's God's Spirit. You know, I guess, are you saying, so because the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit, enters the person, therefore somehow we'd be able to pull information the other way? Is that kind of what you're saying? For who knows a person's thought except the spirit of that person? All he's saying is that you individually, no one knows your thoughts except your spirit, which is in you. So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Oh, did you say 12? Now we have received not the spirit of this world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. So it seems somewhat direct. No. God's gift of salvation, which believers can comprehend because of the Spirit, contextually with everything else, if you pull it in, that at least is apparent. It doesn't really say anything about what you're saying, but that much is apparent from the previous context. So believers can comprehend that. He's been talking about comprehension, your ability to compute, our ability to conceive and understand. We can conceive and understand the gift of salvation because of our connection to God's Spirit. In Romans, he talks about a similar thing. Let me think real quick. I get why you're saying it. I understand why you're saying it. I think if it didn't say freely given, it seems somewhat directional. And then specifically kind of granted to what is allowed. What is allowed? I don't know. I don't think you could rule that out, dude. I don't feel comfortable like ruling it out as an interpretation personally. I'd be interested to see if there's anything on that, like in scholarship. There's no way I remember enough to for me to say, in order for me to say this to matter. I don't recall ever hearing that or reading that, but I wouldn't rule it out. The thing that gets me though is that it seems somewhat specific. So he said, now that we receive not the spirit of this world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. For me, the big picture kind of takes that away. But again, I get the thought process. I get the thought process. I think a lot of it too is my aggregated views on our inability to pull from God like that is definitely clouding my ability to agree with it. But I definitely get where you're coming from. It's an interesting thought. Yeah, I've never heard a commentary. It just jumped out while listening. Yeah, I'd be interested to see, dude. If you could find anything else on it, or like anybody corroborating it, and then maybe explaining why they think that. Because again, you guys all have to remember that, like, beyond what I pull from commentaries and beyond like the notes that I've had for years from wherever, whether it's like seminary or after seminary or anywhere, it's just like a collection of information. Beyond that, it's an aggregate of my own interpretation, which like you shouldn't just take. Don't just accept that. It's an aggregate of my interpretation, which also stems from my own personal biases. Like, I have a personal bias that we have the absolute inability to conceive God. Ghost doesn't really have that bias. So as he was reading, 10 through 12, to him, some of that came across in a different way where what exactly did you say? Let me read. I want to read it verbatim. Would verse 10 and 11 not institute that we can know God's intentions? And I mean, in a way, I completely agree with that. Because I think, again, with everything I was saying before, where if you have the power cord, if you are like in some way connected to the Spirit, which is God, I think it is like a two-way transfer. I think either way, we're transferring data to God all day, every day, because he lies outside of all of this. So it's the old, understanding of like God can be clicked into everybody on the planet all at the same time with no issue of pulling that data and understanding it, because it's completely outside of all of this. We can't understand that because we have a very limited ability to intake data, which is why kids are dumber than they've ever been, because they're intaking too much data. They can't process any of it. They're just taking it in, consuming it, and regurgitating it. So I think on one hand, I agree with that, because I do think that we can know some of God's intentions, but I do also think that it's what is freely given to us, which is one, salvation for sure. And in the greater context, I'm leaning that that's just what it was about, but also in kind of a off of the beaten path. I think yes. I think you can understand God's intentions because you're plugged in. But I still think that's a thing that's given to you. I don't know if it's like just an open line of communication of data. If that all makes any sense at all. It's an interesting thought, though. I'd be very curious to see if anybody, from a commentary view or from a scholarship view has run with that. I would not be surprised, really. I guess also, if you wanted to get into it, try to find anywhere else from Paul specifically that makes it even seem like he's saying that, and then kind of cross-reference it all. It's an interesting thought. I'm similar boat, Ruth. What did Ruth say? Ruth said, I think about God every day. I might not read the Bible all the time, but I think about God. Being alone gives one a lot of mind time to think. Yeah. So then I would ask, does thinking of God count? Because you guys know my job is to be an asshole, so I'll be the asshole. Does that count? Does that matter? Does thinking about God matter? Or not matter, because I think it matters no matter what. But does thinking about God, does that count as being spiritually connected to the other side of reality, and specifically to the entity that we describe as God? Is it the same thing? Like, if I go about my day and I'm thinking about God, is that equivalent? Is it synonymous with being intentionally spiritually tied? And I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm curious. Joe, it's like our brain has a 1 meg download and several terabytes. Yeah, that's how I see it. And that's like generous to me. I see it even worse than that. I see it way worse than that. Oh, Graves, you're here. We're at the end, my man. Thinking of God is step one. Totally. I am always asking God questions. And that's like conversation, yeah. I don't know the answer, just to be clear. I'm not like prodding because I have the answer and I'm about to gotcha. I have no idea. There are many days where I just also think about God. I think about it. or I'll think about things in the Bible, and I'll think about, theological topics or whatever. For me, I don't count that, because for me, my brain, I know myself well enough to know that it's not in a spiritual sense that I'm doing it. I'm not being spiritual. I'm being analytical. I'm being data driven. I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about God academically, which I've talked about in the past is a massive issue for me personally, is that I make God an academic thing. I make God which is just terrible. It's terrible. But I catch myself doing it all the time. I think part of it is because I do all of this. So a lot of all of the preparing for the talks that we have in the Bible study and stuff is very academic. But even in that, I should be trying to be thoughtfully in meditation while I do it. And so when I catch myself, I do. But more often than not, I'm just approaching it academically. Well, what is the context? What is the demographic? What was going on with Corinth, at the time? What were the religions that they were dealing with? What was that one thing that Paul said in chapter 5 that would be relevant for me to make a note on as we go through 3? That's how I approach all of this, which is a huge flaw. It's a massive flaw. That's why I pushed that, because I think about God and theology and all this stuff all day, every day. And then I do this stuff, which is hours and hours and hours and hours a week. But I personally find myself not spiritually engaged with it, which I think is a problem. That's why I think I've said it before, but something I started not, a couple months ago is, at the very least, every night, and when Kat and I are in bed getting ready for bed, I literally lay face first on the floor and put my face against the ground. Because it's the one time guaranteed that I just completely shut off, and I try to just be spiritually meditative. Because I too often, for me personally, and this is why knowing yourself personally is more important than anything else. For me personally, I make everything too academic. And I do it in other areas of my life too. It's why Kat hates me. But I make everything too academic, too much data, and not as much opening my heart and opening my mind to what is happening spiritually. In me, outside of me, it's a huge flaw of myself. So just be aware of what your flaws are. And if thinking about God is a spiritual thing for you, then I personally would think you're good. That's a beautiful thing. That's a very good thing. Ruth said, is spiritually connected a frequency or energy that we can experience? I've heard that when you get the Spirit, you start feeling a certain way, yet others, once they decide to believe, feel nothing. Ooh, this is a whole thing. Well, I'll read Ghost first. Ghost responded to that and said, I think it's both, Ruth. I'll share my definitions for spirit, soul, and body later. It ties to your question 100%. So, Joe, it's I already read that. Oh, man, I skipped some stuff. Okay, so, Ruth, my short answer to this. I think most people who decide to believe don't actually believe. Many do, I'm sure. But I think a lot of people are culturally driven to Christianity. They're not spiritually driven to Christianity. And I think that goes for any religion. I think in any religion, in any demographic, in any country. Data shows it too, that most people flow into the religion of their culture. That's just how people work. We do it with politics. We do it with food. We do it with everything. It's how humans function. So my fear, and it's always has been, is that a major portion of Christians in America today aren't actually Christian, because they're not actually saved in the biblical sense. Because I don't think many of them have had a spiritual experience. I think they decided to be a Christian. I don't think you necessarily decide that. Biblically, it doesn't make sense. Theologically, it doesn't make sense. It's a wild thing that people have just accepted. It makes no damn sense at all. You can't just decide to be. You can decide to put the time in. You can decide to put the effort, put your attention on it. You can decide to sit with your face on the floor and try to be spiritually connected to God. Try to hear something, or not audibly, but to feel that spirit you can decide to do all those things. I don't think you can decide to be a Christian. I think you can decide to wear the label of a Christian or any religion. Again, that's my opinion, and people do not like me for it. But I feel it very strongly. I think at some point, if you actually spiritually connect to the other side, I think you do feel something. I think there is a radical change in your perspective, if nothing else. I don't think you see white light. Maybe some people do. But I think more than anything else, once you've actually, literally, as a human in this reality, connected to something that is outside of this reality, I think something inside of you changes. And I can only speak for me, but something radically changed about the way I viewed the world, the way I viewed morality, the way I viewed treating people, the way I viewed myself. It all radically changed. And it wasn't in an instant, but the feeling that something the fuck just happened was instant. I felt it. It wasn't crazy. It was subtle. But then right after that, it was just boom, boom, one after another. Everything about the way I viewed the world just completely shifted. And there was no way to really explain it for me. And I'm cynical. So I feel like I would have found a way to explain it. And I just could not. I'm always asking God questions. That is me. Yeah, I definitely get that. I'm constantly just be like, why the hell? Why the hell is this happening? Maybe not. Kat said maybe not, probably not. Joe, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I feel most connected to God when I'm interacting with nature and animals, even just a weed in the yard, little worms and such too. No, I think that makes sense. I think here's the other thing, if that's not clear, is like I think people are connected to God in massively different ways. I think when I'm not being bad at it, when I do the academic stuff because it massively feeds me, if I do it intentionally and with a meditative mind, I don't feel closer to God any other time than that. When I do stuff like this, like what we're doing here, and that's why like a lot of people go into teaching or go into preaching because they feel the closest to God when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is what Paul was talking about in what we just read. When you're in touch with the Spirit, you have some kind of understanding of what the plan is. You feel like, oh, I get it. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I knew from from very soon after, like I got, quote unquote saved, I will be teaching in some form or fashion. So I went the academic route, hated it. I went the pastor route, in a church, hated it. I went back to the academic route to get a master's degree, hated it again. Left, started doing this stuff, just talking to people, and it's what it is. It's what I love. It's what feeds me the most. It's when I feel the most connected to the other side of reality. And I think that comes across, like Kat was saying, in nature. She's an animal. She gets nothing more in any other scenario than when it has to do with God's creation, with animals, with nature. And so why would she not feel the most connected to God when she's the most close to the thing that she's spiritually tied to him through? To me, that makes perfect sense, and I don't think that's a hot take at all. At all. The gulf between download and upload is overwhelming. Yeah, absolutely overwhelming. Always giving thanks to our Creator for my life. I mean, gratitude is another thing, man, that people don't talk about a lot. How often are you, grateful? Intentionally. Not like having a brief feeling of gratitude. Like, how often... God, dude, it makes you feel like garbage. The life that we live in America, even with how messed up it is, when compared to the rest of the world, or just compared to maybe your neighbor or a neighborhood not 20 minutes from you, where their quality of life is significantly lower than yours, lower than mine. How crazy is it that I have a hard time living in gratitude? It took me years to make gratitude like a staple emotion that I feel every day, of being grateful, of not complaining, of not bitching and moaning about things. Because the reality is, with all my hard days and all our hard years, we've gone through a lot of terrible stuff. And my childhood was awful, and Kat's childhood was awful, and I'm sure half of you, if not more's childhood was awful. Cool. But think about the young girls who were picked up at 3 years old and sold into slavery. Your life is fucking cake in comparison. You have at least that. If nothing else, it's a reason to be grateful. If your kid is healthy and happy and goes to a school that's not indoctrinating them, like mine, thank God, you have things to be grateful for. It doesn't mean we can't complain or like be upset or have a hard day. But I think personally, you have to have perspective still and recognize what is hurting you and what you're having a hard time with. Acknowledge it because it's valid. But then also be like, okay, but I'm super grateful that like that's my problem, because their problem is significant. I couldn't even imagine having their problem. How hard that would be. Perspective is wildly important for me personally. I don't think that's bad, Joe. There are different cells in a body that specialize in different functions, yet all work in concert for the whole. We need academic cells as long as you're self-aware. Yeah, but that was a problem. Is a lot of time I if I'm not intentional about it, I lose the spiritual nature of it, and it becomes just academic, like just information. It's just information. I'm just teaching the information, and that's not what it is. It's not at all what it is. And when I get really stressed is when I find I do it the most, where I completely neglect anything spiritual, and it's all just data information. That's bad. In my opinion, that's bad. But as long as, you can balance, I think it's a good thing. We need academic people. We need people who are data-driven, just like we need people who are emotional. We need people who are in touch with their emotions, because some other people are not, and there's balance in that. Ruth said, there are many views about the Holy Spirit, including the Spirit being of female in essence. Sophia, as my Hebrew roots friend says. Sophia, that's funny. I have heard people talk about receiving the Holy Spirit and then having overwhelming feelings of guilt, and they sob and cry. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I was somewhat that person. I don't know. At some point, we'll do like testimonies in the Discord group, and I'll, unleash some of that. But I was a very not good guy in a lot of different ways, doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been, involved in a lot of things I should not have been. And when I connected to what I believe is God many years ago, I had an overwhelming feeling of guilt and shame and regret. And because I finally, like I said, I finally realized that everything I believed and everything I was evil, was immoral, was wrong on every possible level, was wrong. So I definitely felt that. I can identify with that. It was the most just terrible feeling I've ever felt in my life. But it was followed by definitely good things. Agreed with... but I did want to say, so views about the Holy Spirit, including the Spirit being a female in essence, Sophia, as my Hebrew roots friend says. From what, though? So I don't think the Spirit has like a gender essence. Personally, I don't. That's my opinion. I think you'd be hard pressed though to justify either male or female. I think you'd have a hard time pushing either of those. I think the easiest like kind of view of that would be maybe the Spirit like interacts with people in a way that they'd better receive it. Maybe. Perhaps. So perhaps for some people who would receive guidance, from God through the spiritual connection, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, perhaps some people would receive that better from a female feeling entity or manifestation, and maybe some people would feel it better, or some people would receive it better through a more masculine essence or integration, maybe. I think again, it's not a female-male thing for me with what I understand of the Bible. I think you'd have a hard time pressing either gender. The seed was planted and started to germinate. Joe, the feeling you got was a result of that. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I think I needed to be massively humbled was my thing. I needed to be wildly humbled, and I got exactly that. I was humbled to a degree that I never thought was possible. And just all of a sudden, I saw reality for what it was, and I saw people for the important beings that they are. To me, like, people didn't have value. Life didn't have value. Hurting people didn't have value. Violence had no negative value. I had a totally skewed evil view of the world. And the seed was planted. My brain was wrecked. And then I started to see things for what they were. Ruth said, the only time I have felt anything not of this world was when I had sleep paralysis. And on the opposite end of a spiritual spectrum, heavenly was when my dad took his last breath. If heaven or God. Interesting. Yeah, man, at some point, sleep paralysis is on the topic list as well, because we've talked about it very sporadically. But over the past year, I've never had sleep paralysis before. Actually, once right around the time my mom died. Actually, once I experienced sleep paralysis. Beyond that, never anything like it in any way whatsoever. Over the past year and over the past couple of months, I've experienced it more than I would like. It's been like a somewhat constant thing. Not like every day, but it's like a relatively consistent thing that I've been experiencing. And it's god awful. Nature. We're all walking antennas, Ruth. I think stars and planets are amplifiers. That will be enough woo-woo for tonight. I like that, though. I don't disagree with that. When I began to practice gratitude every day, Kat said everything seemed to get better. Yes, and I don't think it was a perspective change only. More came to me as I became more grateful. Yeah, for sure. But I think, how do you become more grateful? Maybe I'm being closed-minded. But I guess my personal experience is like, the only way I became more grateful was through perspective. But maybe that's not for everybody. Like, I had to gain more perspective to be more grateful. Actually, yeah, I guess that doesn't make sense. You don't have to have massive perspective changes to be grateful. You can just be grateful. I think what did it for me was changes of perspective. But I can see why other people would not have that experience. Working in Gary also was a game changer. I haven't been in an area like that since I was a teen, and I was overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude. It was eye-opening, yeah. Some of the places we work and are eye-opening, yes. I'll send a woo-woo dump in a while. Gratitude is seriously lacking in our world. We were just talking about this, Mikkel, the lack of gratitude. Yeah, it's alarming. It's alarming. And you wonder why people, relationships, culture is so busted. Like, no, you don't. No one's grateful for anything. Everyone is always complaining about what is not. They're never just grateful and content with what is. Learning to be content and grateful for what is it's the only way to be happy. Why would you not want to be happy? Bitching and moaning and complaining about what is not never got anybody anything, and it never made what is not something that is. But being content with what is, one, you at least get to live and be happy. That's enough. That's enough. But also, people who are content and pleased with what they have, they tend to be in a better place to be able to achieve and acquire some of the other things that they wanted, and then make those things reality for them. Gotta save my ass too many times for me to count. Yep. Keeping a gratitude journal and acts of love journal. Just a couple pocket notebooks, highly recommended. Absolutely. I used to do that. I do the whole written down thing, where like every day you'd write what you were grateful for that day. And I still do it, actually. Or I guess we started doing it again. There's an app, y'all, that I will recommend now that Kat and I use. It's called Daylio. I just put it in the chat. It's called Daylio, and it's real cool. For me, it's real cool because it's very data and analytic driven. So you can like track everything. It's beautiful if you're weird like that. But it's like it's a feelings journal basically, but it's like a daily check-in, and you can tie all these emotions to events, and like it's a way of logging what you go through every day. And then it obviously logs it over time. So then you can connect the dots of, well, when it seems like whenever this happens, I feel this, this, and this, and maybe that makes me behave this negative way. So then you can identify, like, that's how I correct that. That's how I fix that. If every time, for example, like every time Kat and I get in some kind of spat or disagreement, then I do this bad behavior, or I regress into these negative emotions, then you can connect those dots, and then you can do something about it. It's a real cool app, though. It's very, very cool. And it's got great analytics. That's the most important thing. And you can add like pictures and stuff. It's pretty neat. It's neat stuff, y'all. It's good stuff. I think we'll wind down here. So I guess reminder, actually, nobody bail yet, because this week is going to be weird. This week's going to be weird. So let me pull this up here real quick. All right. So remember, I think you guys voted for Thursday, right? Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So movie night. Yeah, I already posted about it, actually. Okay. So Thursday, normal time, 7 p.m. Central Time, Thursday. We are not doing the podcast. We're going to do movie night. So that will be held in the movie night streams and live voice channel. Basically all you just do is show up at 7 o'clock. Pop in there. I'll probably have it up by like 6. Honestly, I'll probably be in there at like 6:30 to make sure it's all running and working right. But we will start promptly at 7 o'clock because it is a school night and a work night. So as soon as it's over, I got to go to bed and make sure my kid goes to bed. So 7 o'clock, we will start the movie. If we can, we might have some discussion after. That's going to suck because that's going to be really tight. Oh, we'll see. If possible, I'm sure everybody will chat. Maybe we'll pause and stuff. We'll see how it goes. We might pause a few times and discuss any of the major stuff. We all maybe actually, we all take notes or go in the chat and we can keep some bullets in the chat, or maybe throughout the movie while everybody's in the chat on Discord, maybe me, Ghost, Kat, Mikkel, if he's available, perhaps some of us will pull notes from the chat, questions, comments, things to talk about, and then maybe the following week, Thursday, we come back for a discussion of the movie. Perhaps that 1.25 speed. I don't want to do that to everybody. I would be ecstatic if we could watch this movie above 1 time speed. But I don't want to do it to people who maybe will have a hard time with that. I get that some people have a hard time with it, and I understand why. So maybe, but maybe not. Maybe not. I think because Tim talks fast. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, maybe not. He talks too fast. I don't want to deter anybody from being present for movie night because I have an affinity for fast talking. I think we'll watch it at normal speed. Ghost and myself and Kat and whoever else is willing take notes of the chat as it goes, and our own notes too, so that next Thursday we can come back and then we could have a discussion maybe the next Thursday. I'll run a poll. I mean, you guys decide. I'll run a poll about how we do it, but that's kind of my just like first thought is do that, because I think it's a 2-hour video already, and honestly, I can't stay on past like 9:30 at most because I'll be dead. I wake up at 4 o'clock, so I'll be dead. So we'll figure it out, but I'll post a poll for all that stuff, and we'll see what we're gonna do. So Thursday will be the movie. Saturday will be the normal, news and whatnot, and then depending on what you guys vote on, maybe next Thursday will be a discussion of it. If not, then it'll go back to normal. But we'll figure it out. We will figure it out. I'll try to get that poll up tonight. That's what I think. I'm super down for doing the following Thursday as the discussion because it's a great topic. It's a really good topic. So as long as a few of us have enough to say, and as long as people are engaged and there's a conversation, I don't see a problem. I think we could fill at least an hour. Please no booze. I watched it in fast speed. Good for you. Yes. I have a hard time listening to anything at normal speed anymore. I've ruined my brain. I have ruined my brain. So that's that. I guess the only other thing is some of the ladies were asking for like a homesteading section in the Discord. So I'm playing around with it, but there's lifestyle now. So what I'm thinking is we'll have things like self-growth, like, you know, people read like self-help books, and like Mikkel put in, you know, the prayer journals and stuff like that, gratefulness journals. That to me is like self-growth. So self-growth is something I'm a huge on. You know, I'm the guy who like listens to all the self-help books, and because it interests me, even if I disagree with them, it interests me how to always be better. I'm obsessed with like trying to fix and solve and just one step better all the time. So self-growth is something I'm super interested in. So I figure lifestyle can cover like health, self-growth, homesteading, all that jazz. So that I threw it up. I'll play with it until we get it figured out. But just so you know, it's there. That's what that is. I know specifically they wanted to discuss homesteading. So there's a forum for homesteading, which I think is great. I think that's awesome. Hello.
Hey.
What's going on?
Snake things.
Homesteading and health. Yeah. In a lot of contexts. Right? That's why I figured lifestyle is probably like the best name for it. Health, homesteading, which would be like gardening and growing your own stuff, canning. What did I put in there? Gardening, personal growth, health, canning and preserving, DIY, parenting, kid stuff. That's all like lifestyle. So a more like, it's just a less focused in on like the topics that we normally talk about, and more of just like life, just life. So I'm going to play with it, but my plan is to have the first channel be a chat room, and then have a forum to be able to organize everything more in depth. And then at some point, I want to do that with all of these channels too. So at some point, I want to have a new section for theology, where there's a theology quick chat room, which is like this, but then there's also a theology forum, where you guys can organize specific topics. And then I want to do it with everything in there. So the Bible would have a Bible chat room, and then the Bible would have a Bible forum. So that in whatever topic you wanted to talk in, there's a quick chat ability in the chat room form, and then there's also a forum so that you can organize all the topics in case you want like everything to be in one thread. Because the thread ability in Discord just sucks. The way it works is horrible. It's not very functional. So we're going to test it out with the lifestyle thing, see how it goes. And then if this goes well and everybody likes it, we'll run a poll. And then I might break up all of these topics into their own so that they have a chat room and then they also have a dedicated forum. I think it might be good. It's similar, like that's how I set up the porn support forum for Discord. Is like each section has a chat room, and then there's a bunch of forums that are more specific for topics. Chat room, forums. I think it'd be good. Jeanette Reno enters the chat. Janet Reno? Oh no, what did I do? The bird? Oh, Bluebird.
The bird that I brought home when you were paying attention.
No birds.
Has Blue ever been on the live?
Blue. Come here. Come here.
That's a good look.
Say something smart. Say smart stuff.
Mom's cooking.
Say smart stuff.
That's what she says.
All right.
You're so awkward.
What about AI Judas? What about AI Judas? Well, I'm telling y'all, we cannot afford it unless somebody wants to make a massive donation. How do you even do it? Is it gonna let me show you all this? Actually, let me get this off real quick, just in case. Okay, so just so you guys know, the reason I have not granted us with AI Judas is because it's wildly expensive. And there's just no way. What my hope is that at some point, once this all grows bigger, what I want to do is I will buy it for the VIP, for like the premium. So everybody who, you know, throws in $5 for the subscription thing, that'll be for that. I'll eventually do that. So once there's enough people who are members on our Discord, I will purchase it for the members to be able to use. So it'll only work in like it'll work everywhere, but only people with the subscriber role will be able to use it. Because there's limitations. Like you don't just get unlimited if you pay for it. So even if we spent $7 for the silver, 100 and then you're done. So the problem with that is that if Mikkel goes AI Judas crazy, he burns it up for everybody else, and then everybody hates Mikkel.
And then he has to get sacrificed.
And then he what? And then he has to get sacrificed. So that's the issue. So the only way I see this being solved is that I was showing you the wrong prices. Yeah, so platinum is unlimited, and this is $70 a month. It's a monthly subscription, yes. It's $70 a month for unlimited. So my plan is once there's enough subscribers on the Discord, I will take the money you guys use to subscribe, and the first $70 every month will go into paying for the AI thing. And then only you guys will have the ability to use it, because that's fair. That's fair. So that's my plan. Ever since you guys limited it or hit the limitation on it earlier last month, I kind of decided that's the way I think I want to go about it. All of the people who subscribe will be able to use it and then have unlimited so that one person can't ruin it for everybody. Because if Mikkel goes AI Judas crazy, everybody else gets screwed. And then people will be upset. So it's got to be unlimited or else it's not fair. And unlimited is $70 a month. So as soon as we're bringing in that much money, I will put it right back into the AI thing so everybody can use it. I have no problem doing that. I think that'd be great. Yeah, it's crazy expensive. It's very expensive. That's been the dilemma, just so I guess we're all on the same page with that. If I can give Timothy Poole $10 a month, I can give you $10 a month. Well, so there's 1/7 of your AI right there. 1/7. Done. We'll get there. Y'all, we just need to be patient. We'll get there. Just share our thing. Share what we're doing here with people on your social media or people that you know. That's the best way to make this happen. I mean, not getting AI, but also getting AI Judas. That's just try to figure out ways to bring people here.
We need to make stickers for people to pass out.
We should make stickers. You guys just have to understand, the internet, social media, absolutely, well, just YouTube. YouTube absolutely has bogged everything about my channel. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I disappeared for 2 years. Maybe it's because we talk about the things we talk about. I don't know. But either way, I get no organic AI push. I get no algorithm push. So everybody who comes here is because I'm spending hours and hours and hours pushing content on social media. Otherwise, none of this would work because YouTube they do not recommend my videos at all. In the past, hundreds of thousands of views. Now, nothing. So it's 100% on me and the time I put into social media and you guys, sharing stuff. That's the only way anything happens with this. And then from there, people will just subscribe, dude. Like, it's what happens. People will do it. If they like something and they believe in something, they'll subscribe. I subscribe to all sorts of crap that I believe in. I like what they're doing. I think what they're doing is great. Even some stuff that I don't really watch. I paid for a year at some point, and I'm happy that they have the money because they're doing good things, even if I'm not super into it. It's good stuff. So eventually we'll get there. And then we'll get platinum, and then you can use AI all day long. And there are other cool features to it, too. Start putting some cute anime girls in the thumbnails. Yeah. What?
That'll get them.
It will. I've thought about like pandering to clickbait. I just really don't want to. It's a moral dilemma. AI Judas should come with the silver plan. I agree, for $6.99 or whatever. Yeah, I agree. Build every year at... We'll see. Maybe at some point soon, when we get a few more people, I'll grab gold or diamond, as long as I can cover the cost. I'll grab gold or diamond, and it'll only be used by those people. I'm just worried someone will ruin it for everybody, and then someone will be upset that they subscribe. Like, they'll be upset they spent money. It's a crappy scenario, but I might do it because it's still so small. As long as I can cover the cost, it'd be good for the people that do use it. We'll see. We'll get there though. All right. Anything else? Last burning desires. Anything else important going on? Who?
Happy.
Is that his name now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he would happily freaking kill me. Maybe if I call him happy, then he'll actually be a happy guy. He'll be a happy snake.
Maybe.
And not want to strangle me in my sleep.
It's possible.
That's what I'm hoping for.
It's definitely possible. I tried to use the AI in Discord, you can see, just to pull up the pricing, and Jules was on it. I think one more week. I'll do it at some point. Soon. Once we get two more, how about that? Once we get two more people to sign up for like the Discord subscriber thing, I'll go ahead and get like the gold one, and everybody who's in the VIP, the subscriber thing, they'll have the permission to use it, and then we'll see how that goes. If it becomes a problem, I'll pull back until I can pay for the unlimited one. But if it works, then we'll just let it run until it doesn't, I guess. But like, I get that people really like it, and it's super funny to watch. It's very, very funny. So maybe we'll do that. It's a cool feature that they done. It was very smart of them to implement that the way that they did. It was very wise. All right, I think we're good. I think we're good for the night. Time to shut her down. I hope everybody has a lovely night. Obviously, none of you are watching the Super Bowl, which doesn't really surprise me, actually. Oh, wow. All right, yeah, done. So Thursday, movie night. Possibly follow up to movie night the following Thursday to discuss it all. Saturday will be normal. And I feel like there's something else that I'm totally just bringing up, but maybe it'll come to me. Closing time. I love when Crowder does closing time. It's a good bit. It's usually a pretty funny bit. The Louder with Crowder closing time. Whoa. Let's call it a night. Yep. Everybody take care. Everybody have a good night. I love y'all. I will see y'all in the Discord. Sleep well. No sleep paralysis.